Hello everyone and welcome to today's video. As you can tell by the title, I am going to be sharing all of my apartment renting tips. So I wanted to make this video after getting so many questions on my Instagram and even some in my previous YouTube videos sharing my apartment tour in downtown Portland. I've been getting a lot of questions from you guys about my tips for moving into an apartment either for the first time or into a new city, and specifically in Portland, Oregon. So I thought I would make this video to be able to answer all of your questions about that. So I'm going to start off by talking about some of my general tips for how to find an apartment, but then I'm also going to be sharing some Portland specific advice as well. So whether you're just looking for an apartment for the first time or you are interested in moving to Portland, Oregon, I hope that you find something valuable from this video. And for those of you who are new here, my name is Marissa and I am a fashion and lifestyle content creator. I've lived in Oregon my whole life, but I very recently moved to Portland because I got a job here as a social media and marketing manager. And I'm also graduating from Oregon State University in about a month and a half now. So without any further rambling, let's get into the video. All right, so the first thing you want to do in your apartment hunting journey is to figure out what area you want to live in. So whether that is a specific city or a neighborhood within the city, I would definitely do your research. You can ask any families and friends that you already have living there. You can look online at different websites. For anyone who's interested in moving to Portland specifically, I looked at this website right here to get myself familiar with some of the different neighborhoods within Portland. I asked a lot of friends that I have living up here, but most importantly, if you can, I highly recommend visiting the area that you want to live in and actually taking a walk around the neighborhood, because that can make such a difference in what you see online to what you actually experience when you go there. Also, when you're figuring out what area you want to live in, I would consider things like what area suits your lifestyle, what is the proximity to work or school depending on why you're moving, and then also what area fits your financial budget. Some of the places that I recommend looking for an apartment online are apartments.com, Apartments List, Zillow, and Trulia. Those were all websites that I looked at. I personally had the most success on apartments.com. I felt like they had the biggest selection of apartments to look at, and it was like the easiest to navigate and filter through all of the different listings. But it also depends on what type of living arrangements you are looking for. So I was looking to rent from an apartment building, but maybe if you're looking for more of a subletted type apartment, then there might be a different website that's better suited for you. So I wanted to briefly touch on budget because that is a huge factor of what apartment you're going to be choosing. So I will preface all of this by saying I am not a financial guru by any means. I did a ton of my own research online to figure out how much I could afford to spend on my apartment based on how much I'm making a year. And of course, everyone has their own financial situation, so I would take all of this with a grain of salt. This is kind of just my general advice for how to budget for an apartment, especially if it's your first time or you're getting your first real job outside of college. So like I said before, there are tons of online resources that can help you figure out how much you should spend on your living expenses, and it's also just based on what you're comfortable with doing that and balancing it with like savings and your disposable income. So I just wanted to briefly touch on your apartment budget specifically, because as I was searching for my apartment, I realized that there were so many apartment expenses that like I never would have even associated with my rent, but I decided to kind of bundle all of them together just to stay on the safe side of my spending and make sure that I'm not overspending or signing a lease on an apartment that was actually outside of my budget. So a couple of the things that I recommend factoring into your overall apartment or living expenses on top of your apartment rent would be parking, especially if you're living in a city. The utilities, electricity, garbage, all of those things, and then also internet. So I really wanted to bring up parking because that can be a huge kicker to how much your living expenses are going to be per month. So for example, in Portland, especially if you're looking more towards the downtown area, parking can be anywhere from $150 to $200 a month if you want to park in a secure parking garage that's like private to the apartment building that you're living in. There are of course other options for parking if that is a little too high for your budget. Street parking is always an option, and there are also tons of private and public parking garages around the city that you can also buy a monthly pass to. That will be a fraction of the cost. But I personally knew that parking in a secure and private garage attached to my apartment apartment building was an absolute must, so I did factor that into my overall apartment expenses. All right, so now that we've talked a little bit about apartment budgeting and expenses, I wanted to get into some general questions that you should ask before you sign the lease on your apartment. So this is the second apartment that I've rented, and I also worked in an apartment leasing office for a year, so I feel like I have some experience on the renter side and also the business side of apartments. So some questions that I would definitely ask before signing your lease is, one, touring the building if at all possible. If you're watching this during quarantine, I know that a lot of apartments have currently shut down their in-person tours just for like health and safety measures, but nearly all of them are still offering virtual tours where you can do like a video chat with the leasing agent and they can take you around the building, around the unit, or even just send you a plethora of pictures. So I highly recommend taking a tour and seeing the inside of the building or the unit that you're interested in renting, because that can make such a difference from what you see online. For example, I had scouted out 5 apartment buildings that I was interested in renting, and I toured all of them in the same day, and my top pick from online was actually my least favorite when I toured it in person. So granted, if I hadn't taken that in-person tour and just signed the lease without actually viewing the apartment, I probably would have picked a place that I was much less happy with. The second question that I would make sure you ask before you sign your lease is, what is the duration of the lease and is there a lease break fee? Most apartment buildings, it is standard for you to have to pay 1.5 times the rent in order to break the lease early, but that's definitely something to consider if you don't know how long you're going to be staying in an area. And the rent of your apartment can also fluctuate depending on the duration of your lease. This can be either in your favor or against your favor. If you know that you're going to be living somewhere for a longer amount of time and you feel comfortable signing a lease that's say like 12 to 15 months long, there is a higher chance that you can get a cheaper monthly rate on your rent. But say you're only going to be moving somewhere temporarily and you want to sign like a 6 to 8 month lease, they may actually increase the price of your rent because they know that you're not going to be staying there as long of amount of time. Also, don't forget to ask what is included in the rent price. Every building can be different. They may include some of your utilities or expenses, parking, whatever it may be, but definitely make sure that you get that clarified and get a written out list of what is actually included in your rent. I also highly recommend asking about renter's insurance. A lot of buildings will require that, and that is something that you should definitely factor into your living expenses. Renter's insurance is super cheap though. It's really easy to bundle with auto insurance if you already have that, and depending on what premium and deductible you have, it can be anywhere from like $10 to $20 a month at most. And finally, if you're interested in amenities, I would definitely ask the building which ones they offer. A lot of newer apartment buildings in the city will offer things like a community room, a gym, things like that. I also have a budget tip for you guys. Make sure that you check out on the apartment's website or ask the leasing agent if the building is offering any concessions at the time that you're interested in renting. Buildings can offer all types of concessions. One of the most common ones is offering the first 4 weeks or the first month of rent free. And also, depending on the type of building, this concession can either be a lump sum at the beginning of your contract, or they'll deduct a little bit off of the duration of your lease. But regardless of which way it is, it's definitely a good way to save money. And if money is your #1 priority for choosing your apartment, then maybe go with one that offers a really good concession. All right, so now that we've gone through the questions that you should ask before you sign a lease, hopefully you've toured the apartments, you've narrowed down your list of the ones that you are actually interested in renting, and now the only thing to figure out is which one is the right place for you. So once you've narrowed down your list of the places that you are actually really interested in renting from, I recommend doing 3 different things to narrow it down even further to hopefully just the one place that is right for you. So the first thing that I recommend doing to pick the right place is to make a list of your must-haves and your wants in your apartment. So at this point, don't even think about like the places that you've visited. Just consider objectively, what are my absolute must-haves that I can't live without in an apartment, and then what would be those like little luxuries that I would like to have. Depending on how sure you are of like what type of apartment you want, you could even do this at the start of your apartment search, or maybe you'll have a little clearer of a mind at the end once you've already toured apartments. But just to give you guys an idea of maybe some must-haves that you might want on your list, I'll share a couple of mine. So I wanted to make sure that my building had AC and heating in the unit. I also wanted a dishwasher because I absolutely hate doing dishes. I wanted to have a laundry washer and dryer in unit. And since I live in the city, I also wanted to make sure that I was close to public transportation. So those were my 5 absolute must-haves. If the apartment didn't have it, I wasn't going to rent from there. And then everything else beyond that was just an added plus. So I would just keep in mind when you're renting an apartment that you probably will have to compromise in some way, shape, or form. Just ask yourself, what am I willing to compromise on and what am I absolutely not willing to live without? So the final thing to do is to rank the apartments that you are most interested in. So I had narrowed it down to 2 different buildings in 2 different parts of the city. So for both of those buildings, I made 2 side-by-side tables that rated on a scale of 1 to 5, a couple different criteria to help me narrow down which one really objectively fit what I needed from an apartment. And those were the building's proximity to work, if the building fit my lifestyle, if that unit fit my budget as far as the rent, utilities and expenses, and parking. And I also rated the interior of the unit. So I went through that list and rated each apartment on a scale of 1 to 5. I tallied them all up, and whichever one had the higher score, that was the one that I went with because it fit my needs better. Now that may sound a little extra, but renting an apartment really is a big commitment, especially if you're signing a lease that's for an entire year. And if you're anything like me, I absolutely need to love the space that I'm in, so I wanted to make sure that I was 100% happy with the apartment that I chose. Alrighty, I have been talking long enough about apartments. I think I covered everything that I wanted to, so I hope you guys found this video informative. If there is anything that I left out, or if you have any follow-up questions, please feel free to leave any of them in the comments down below, or you can send me a message on Instagram at itsmarisa_k. I am happy to answer any apartment questions that you have. I get that it can be such a process to figure out which apartment is the right one for you. And if you're interested in seeing any other apartment content, I will make sure that I link some of my apartment videos on here. If you want to check out my empty apartment tour or any of my apartment vlogs as I've been moving in. And with that, I hope to see you guys in my next video. Bye!